Hello, I'm Carrie Sanderson. I'm so excited to be here today to talk to you about a path to purpose, job crafting to find meaning in our work. I love this quote to start this out. There's a light in this world, a healing spirit more powerful than any darkness we may encounter. It emerges through the lives of ordinary people who hear a call and answer in extraordinary. And that's what we're going to talk about today is really what is your calling, how to determine that, or at least get on the path to determining that, and then how to make that happen and how to do that for the most part right where you are. So what we're going to talk about today kind of comes in three chunks. So we're going to look at the bigger picture, what's going on in the world right now, why this matters, and how meaning and meaningful work can contribute to our well-being. And then we'll look at the components of job crafting, what it is, and the pieces, the ingredients that you need to bring to the table, and then what the process itself looks like. And we will then have some time for questions. By way of introduction, I just want to let you know why this matters to me. As I said, I'm Carrie Sanderson. I'm Project Manager Senior of Wellbeing and Engagement at Gateway Community College. And this process of job crafting and exploring purpose and calling really led me to where I am today and the work around well-being that I'm doing at Gateway. If you've ever seen me present before, you have likely seen this quote by Dr. John Rush. It's my absolute favorite quote that really captures why I love working in a community college and probably for you as well. To make it a little shorter, the part that really resonates with me, arguably in this enterprise more than any other, these experiences involve individual faces and have strong ties to the human heart and spirit. And that's what we're all about, is creating a home for everyone to become their very best selves. I have about 20 plus years of experience in higher ed, in career services. And several years ago, I discovered the field of positive psychology, which is the science of well-being. And it just kind of blew my mind. And I ended up having the opportunity to go back to grad school for the second time and study applied positive psychology and then bring that back to Gateway initially in career services and the work I was doing there, but then kind of started reaching out more broadly to the college. And it actually became a full-time job for me, which is literally my dream job. And so I share with you kind of how that came about for me and how you can start to think about that for yourself. And why does this matter? This matters always, that people should really care about their work and feel it's their calling, feel it's what they are meant to do, that it makes a difference in the world and contributes, helps other people. But particularly right now, as we've seen through the pandemic, the great resignation. So people are leaving their jobs in droves. As we went into lockdown, we had the opportunity to consider our work and what really mattered to us. And many people found that they really just didn't find meaning in their work, and that's what they were seeking. We all want to feel like what we do matters. And so, really being intentional going forward around designing that kind of meaning and purpose into our work. And this quote by Barry Schwartz, who has a really great TED Talk and then also a book called Why We Work, says it in a really great way that human nature is to a significant degree the product of human design. If we design workplaces that permit people to do work they value, we'll be designing a human nature that values work. And if we design workplaces that permit people to find meaning in their work, we will be designing a human nature that values work. And today is, what do we value, what matters, and how do we get to a place in our work that we feel like that's being accomplished and we leave the workday feeling fulfilled and like we made a difference. So let's take a really quick look at how meaning impacts our well-being. Research around this, both kind of meaning just generally in our lives and then specifically meaningful work. This is the PERMA model, is probably the most widely recognized model of well-being, developed by Dr. Martin Seligman, who's considered the founder of positive psychology. The field itself formally is only about 25 years old, so specifically a time when psychologists and researchers really put a specific emphasis, kind of a positive shift, moving away from the medical model of researching the things that are wrong with us and figuring out how to eliminate those, to what are the things that really help us thrive, the things that make our lives worth living. And so Dr. Seligman launched that positive shift in the field of psychology around 1998. And so this is one of the seminal research and theories of positive psychology, is PERMA, which originally didn't have the H on it, but that is kind of specifically during the pandemic and now semi-post-pandemic has been more widely accepted. So it became PERMA, 6 elements of well-being, which are positive emotion, the presence of heartfelt positivity, engagement, the development of our strengths, our character strengths, relationships, which is the opportunity for genuine connection, and then meaning, which is what we're talking about today. And that's really about the chance to make a positive difference and feel like what we're doing matters. And combined with that is accomplishment, and that's the ability to achieve those things. So meaning and accomplishment kind of come together as the components that matter for us in our work. And then at Gateway, we actually have a framework called the 5 C's of Wellbeing Culture that we've used to implement our well-being strategy at the college. And those 5 C's are character, care, connection, and contribution. And you can see that similarly to meaning and accomplishment, contribution and career kind of crossover in that domain of meaning and purpose in our work. Contribution being a part of something bigger than ourselves and finding a purpose both for learning and for life. So a purpose for learning for our students as they achieve their goals, which will then lead them to make decisions that contribute to both career and life success. So kind of looking at where those two things come together is find that place of meaning and fulfillment in our work and really start to see it as a calling. Generally, meaning is looked at with 4 pillars. So the 4 ingredients that make us feel as if our lives are meaningful, so that we feel that our lives are significant, that they make sense. The pieces that we use to put all of that together, number 1 is belonging. And just like relationships and perma and connection in the 5 C's, this is really our connections and deep, meaningful bonds with family, friends, coworkers, people that value us for who we are intrinsically. Purpose, that's using our strengths to serve others and doing something that's worthwhile. Meaning is kind of the journey of significance and coherence in our lives, and purpose is like the compass. So, purpose is that specific way of getting somewhere, and meaning is all of that making sense. And transcendence is elevation above the daily norm, being able to get in that state of flow and really feeling like you're doing something that is enhanced and elevated. And then finally, storytelling, and that's being able to create our own narratives. So, aligning the way that you tell your story, both to yourself and to other people, so that it aligns with your values. And so, meaningful work, like specifically, this is a model, a positive career decision model that we use at Gateway. It's based on the concept of ikigai, which is the reason you get out of bed in the morning. And so we've kind of applied it to talking to students about career decisions. And that sweet spot in the middle is where all of these overlap, that it leverages your greatest strengths. So you get to bring your best self to it. You love it. It's energizing to you what you're doing, and the world needs it, so it's meaningful and it matters and you feel like it's making a difference. And then of course, Tyler, there's that little piece of getting. But what makes work meaningful? Again, these sort of reflect some of the other components that we've talked about in well-being models and the 4 pillars of meaning. So if your work aligns with yourself, with your values, your beliefs, what motivates you, what energizes you. So it really is in line with who you are, and it feels important and it feels like it matters based on your unique self. It's your connection to others at work, so colleagues, students, patients, your leaders, having a good connection with them, the groups that you interact with. The third component is the work that you do. So that's the context in which you work, and then also the tasks, the things that you do all day long. Some things that we are required to do in our jobs we may find exhausting. They're not things that necessarily come to us naturally, but they're, look for the things that energize you, that put you into that state of flow where you're slightly challenged, so it keeps you interested, but it also leverages your best strengths. So you're really just bringing your best self to the work in facing a challenge. And then finally, spirituality, which can be related to religion, but not necessarily. That's again the bigger picture, the feeling that you're connected to something bigger than yourself, that you're connected to other people, that you're connected to a cause that's really important. That's kind of built in for those of us that have chosen to work in education. We kind of have that, and that's why we are drawn to this field. When your work is meaningful, it again contributes to your sense of well-being by positively influencing your authenticity. So really just being your genuine self, being who you truly are, your sense of self-efficacy, so being able to your sense that you can get things done, that you can accomplish things, your self-esteem, so you feel like what you're doing is worthwhile. It contributes to your sense of accomplishing your purpose, the thing that you feel you're put on earth to do that's really important to you, your sense of belongingness, so your connection to other people, and again, that sense of transcendence where you're connected within yourself. So let's talk about calling. What is a calling? It used to be associated just with religious kind of orientation, people that chose to go into the religious life, but there's a lot of really great research around calling. So, reading this quote, um, think to yourself who might have said this. So, I love patients, I love sick people, I love to help them with my great attitude get through what's difficult for them. I consider the place that I work the house of hope. And so you might be thinking a doctor or a nurse, but what is really cool about this quote is that it's actually one of the cleaning people, the person who keeps the rooms clean, that keeps the environment clean for patients on the oncology ward of a large hospital, so cancer patients. And they feel like they're part of the team and that they were called to do this. And what they do is really, really important, which it is. They have an opportunity to interact with the patients. And so think about the difference that that makes for a sick patient to have everyone who they interact with during their treatment as someone who really feels like they're making. That's important. So the research shows that most people fall into one of these three categories, that they consider their work either a job, a career, or a calling. So job is just basically there for the money. A career is that what you're doing right now you view as a stepping stone to something else. So it's something you have to do in order to move up. And then a calling is just finding fulfillment from the work itself. Like you just intrinsically love what you do and you value it for that, and you're not in it for the money, which again might be a lot of us in education, that we just really, really love what we do and didn't make our choices around income, but that we really feel like our work makes the world a better place. And what's interesting about the research is that the way that you view your work has absolutely nothing to do with the job itself. It has to do with you and your mindset. So, in this huge study of a university hospital, just as many doctors fell into each of these categories, these three categories, as the admins. It did the level of the position just really didn't matter. So there were doctors that were there just for the money, and there were admins that were there for the money, and there, are people in every job category, but there also are people in every single job category that view their work as important. So with that as the context for what we're thinking about job crafting itself and what it is. So it's actually an exercise and a way of looking at work and job design that came out of the Center for Positive Organizations at the Ross School of Business at Michigan. And so there's lots and lots of research that you can read about it, but job crafting is what employees do to redesign their own jobs in ways that foster engagement at work, job satisfaction, resilience, and thriving. And so job crafting can be a formal process, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But if you think about your own work, you've probably been doing this all along. We kind of redesign it and tweak it a little bit to make it so that we can hopefully find the most meaning in it, so that we can bring our best selves to the table. And so it can be, a lot of times managers will get a little bit nervous about this, of like, oh my gosh, if I let my employees do this, they're going to go crazy and they're going to change their jobs. And research has shown that's not really the case at all, that if you let employees, if you allow, encourage, and include employees in their own job design, it's mutually beneficial. It has benefits for everyone, for both the organization and the employees, because it really just allows people to do their best work in a context that is best for the organization. So the three ways of job crafting are task crafting. So that's looking at the actual work and the activities that you do. So, kind of looking at the number, the volume, the nature, or the types of the jobs that you're doing. The second is relational crafting, and that's looking at your relationships and your interaction with other people. So in higher ed, that can be with our colleagues, with our leaders, with students, with people, with faculty, staff, kind of all the different ways that we interact with the people that we encounter in the workplace, on our campuses, or in the district office. And then the third, which really is the most powerful and is the most in the control of the individual, is cognitive crafting. And that's refocusing, reframing, and changing how we perceive our own work and the meaning behind it. So the steps of the formal job crafting process, and we're not going to have time to do this today. It takes a lot of self-reflection and gathering of information and kind of thinking through, but I want to give you all the tools to be able to do it, and you can start thinking about it now. I'll share the slides, and I have a resource document that contains lots of information for you. So start to think about this and kind of gather in your mind. But we're going to go through each of these, and I'll show you what they look like. The very first step is to create a before sketch. So this is kind of a visual design activity. I'll show you what the workbook. There's a workbook that you can purchase. You can also do this whole process online. I just did it with Post-it notes. If you're like me and you have a complete obsession with Post-it notes and you have a whole bunch of different colors of them and different sizes, that works perfectly. And I like them because you can move them around. So you can kind of look at things and redesign. And I think that's a really helpful way to do it, is to just kind of take this process and maybe put it up on a wall or a bulletin board where you can see it and you can ponder it and think about it a little bit and let it all soak in. So you create a before sketch of your current activities. And then you do some self-assessment and some reflection to identify your top strengths, your values, and your aspirations. And then you take these and match them to what your current sketch looks like. And I'll show you how to do that. And then determine any gaps in alignment. There might be some values that you're not really touching on, or strengths that you're not getting to use, aspirations that you're not really getting to work towards. And so you're going to look at those gaps and then figure out how to design opportunities to realign through job crafting. So kind of moving things around, tweaking, and some of it can really just come from the way that you view your work and reframing that. And then finally, you want to make a plan to implement your redesign, because it might require some things like education or different types of experience, things like that. So you'll have a chance to make a plan to reach your goal, your dream job, your aspiration out of this. So this is what your before sketch will look like. Make a list of your daily activities and responsibilities, and kind of just make a list at first, and then think about how much of your time and energy each of them takes, and sketch them into task blocks sized by time and energy. So the things that take up the most time are generally also the things that take the most energy. So make those bigger. And this is just kind of a general sketch of a position that spends a lot of time answering emails and phone calls. I think probably all of us have that all of us have this giant meeting task block of all the time we spend in meetings. And then this person spends some time in one of the enterprise systems working on staff time, vacations, and time cards and that kind of things for their supervisor. And then they spend a little bit of time researching retention best practices. So they work in maybe a student success role. And then they also have the opportunity to present information sessions to prospective students. So kind of a general visual of how day looks. So you've got kind of set that before sketch aside, we're going to go back to it, but let's move on to the self-reflection and the self-assessment. So thinking about what is my purpose? What is my purpose at work? What is it that I really feel like I'm here to do? You want to be able to answer some of these questions, kind of who, why, and how. Are you going to be able to identify and work towards a really specific and meaningful purpose? Again, purpose is that compass that moves you towards finding meaning and fulfillment. So, really, who are you? Being able to describe who you are as a person and thinking about who do you want to be. Think about maybe an aspirational role model, someone who you really admire, and what are some of the traits that they have that you would like to emulate or develop or kind of set free. And then think about kind of why you want to do what you want to do, why this purpose, what are your strengths? So, what can you bring to the table? What allows you to bring your best self, to be your most authentic self? What are the things that when you get to use them, you feel really, really energized and you feel whole? What do you like to do? So again, the activities that you like to do that you find really fun and energizing and challenging. And then what's important to you, and that's looking at your values. So what is something that you would like to achieve, like that you really need to have as a part of what you do so that your purpose is aligned to that. What difference do you want to make? And what is your greatest contribution? And kind of going forward, what do you hope to be able to contribute? Some ways to get really specific around answering those questions. I like the via character survey. You can also use Clifton Strengths Finder. There are a number of strengths assessment, and you can like do as many as possible, get as much information as possible. It's really good to have language around this. Character strengths have a lot of research behind them that show that these 24 strengths are universal. So both across cultures and across time, that these are the 24 key ingredients that make good humans. And so you can take the survey for free and identify what your signature strengths are. If you haven't done that assessment before, you can probably look at this and really identify at least a handful of yours, and then the language around that and be able to speak to it. You definitely will want to, if you haven't before, and it's probably a really good time to revisit it post-pandemic, if you haven't done this for a while, is a values clarification exercise. This is kind of a prioritize and elimination exercise where you look at these and you start by really quickly choosing your top 10 and then get that 10 down to your 5 essentials. And you can think about this in the context of your work, sort of you at work. So some of your values might be individual to you as a person, and then some of them might be more broad, the values that you value for humanity, for your community. So for me, family is obviously incredibly important, but within my work context, when I think about what my purpose is for work, that's just a given. so I don't include it in here. It's important to me to be a good role model for my kids, but when I think about what's important to me at work, I want to bring some of these other things to the table. So it is hard. It's really hard to get it down to 5 or just a handful, but that's an important process to go to really get at what's most important. Another way, these are some really great questions adapted from a new book called The Art of Insubordination by positive psychologist Todd Kashdan. These are great questions to ask and just kind of think about, and this can help inform the way that you design your job craft as well. So, who are the people you would most like to thank? So, who are people that have been really influential? Who's the wisest person you know? What do you think is your main purpose in life? Can you identify that at this point? What makes you strong? If with the wave of a magic wand, all of your insecurities disappeared, what would you be doing differently? Isn't that a magical question? And if you had unlimited money, what would you be doing differently? So, what are the things that are so important that you would be doing them anyway? Imagine you could achieve anything, what would it be and why? I just think really, really big, think bold. At the end of your life, what do you want to be remembered for? And so these are to the essence of what's really, really, really important. And an important consideration for you comes also from a new book that just came out called The Power of Regret: How Looking Backwards Can Move Us Forward. Author Dan Pink conducted the World Regret Survey, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people responded and gave both quantitative and qualitative information. But when it came down to it, our regrets, people who are alive and have regrets, fall into these 4 categories. So around foundation and stability, if only I'd done the work, if only I had completed my college degree, if only I had started saving, for my retirement early enough, things like that, where you can't go back in time and fix something, but you can usually start it now. Moral regrets. So, if only I'd done the right thing. And in most cases, these are people that didn't do something. They're not, I mean, there are a handful, but in general, they're not people who did something wrong and regretted it. They're people who regretted not stepping up and doing the right thing, standing up for somebody, speaking up, that kind of thing. The third is around connection and love. If only I'd reached out. If only I'd spoken to that person. If only I'd stayed in touch with them. If only I'd had that conversation, become friends with that person, partnered with them, collaborated with them, whatever it might be. And then the last one I think is really important to keep in mind as you're going through this process is boldness around, growth and risk taking. If only I'd taken that risk. So when it comes to work, most people regret the things they didn't do. So let's now, pause, magically come back in time with all of this information that you've reflected on, that you've done assessments, and you're kind of ready to go with, 3 to 5 strengths, 3 to 5 values that are really important to you, and 3 to 5 aspirations, passions, things that you want to make sure happen. And so you take a look, pull out that before sketch, and take a look at where these things align with what's currently happening. So these are strengths: fairness, creativity, and kindness. These are the ingredients that make this person who they are. And they really, really, really need to be able to bring these to their work. And so when you look at what they're doing, they kind of align in some of these places. So fairness is around, making sure that all of the staff gets paid fairly for their work. keeping up meetings and making sure people get to have a voice in those meetings, creativity, researching and kind of looking at creative new ways to do things, and kindness and compassion, being someone that cares for students, that cares for other people. These are values for this person. So again, compassion, it's important for them to bring compassion into the world that kind of aligns with their strength of kindness. And they also highly value equity and education. And those kind of broadly cover what's here, but maybe not necessarily really specifically in their role. And then aspirations, this person wants to become a leader, they want to contribute to student success, and they want to focus on their own personal development, kind of where they are in their career. And so again, leadership, they don't have a leadership role, so that kind of doesn't really align with anything. And then personal development, maybe they're taking some classes, they're contributing to student success there. So with these components, with these personal ingredients of this person aligned with what they're doing, and in some cases not really aligned, let's take a look at, let's kind of think about how maybe they can go through the job crafting process, looking at these 3 ways of either redesigning or reframing their work so that it becomes more meaningful. So what can they do with their tasks? One of the things I've done this with teams where the team kind of gets together and basically throws all the tasks on the table, and then they're able to redistribute them based on people's strengths and their interests and their abilities and what energizes them. So you may have some poor creative person who's stuck with a whole bunch of spreadsheet responsibilities that somebody else would just love to get their hands on. And so there are some ways that you can partner with your teammates and really redo the tasks that are there. So that's a really cool way to look at it. To look at relational, so this person may be really, really social and is not finding their work meaningful since we went remote, and they're kind of having a hard time with that, and they really, really, really want to be able to reconnect. And so they can look at the possibility of maybe presenting some of these information sessions to prospective students in person. Again, maybe partnering with someone so that the 2 of them can do the presentations together, and that would be more fun and they would feel more connected. And then so how do we cognitively redesign this work? This is what I did actually when I did this, is I did have in my before sketch a really big meeting block. And I just thought of like meeting time. And then I thought about all the time I spend trying to futilely keep up with emails and horrify my colleagues by how many, unopened emails I have in my Google Mail. And I thought of it that way. And what I did was I actually sat down and looked at the projects that I was working on and how meaningful they are to me. And so for this person, they can kind of separate out those meetings and the emails and the work that are tasks and reframe them around supporting a really meaningful project. So instead of a task list, you can now have a project list. And you know that when you're sitting in those meetings, that's a really meaningful project to you, and you really care about the outcomes of it. For this person, because they really value equity and education, they kind of realize that their guided pathways team that they're sitting on and their diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that they're sitting on are really, really meaningful to them. And so maybe stepping up the amount of work that they do in those and getting a little bit more involved. And then those are going to be people that care about the same things as them. So that kind of elevates their relationships at work, and then the tasks themselves. Well, you like maybe still nobody probably still is going to want to go to a bunch of meetings or do a bunch of email, but you look at them differently. You look at them through a lens that provides more meaning. So finally, with this kind of some redesign in place, there also can be a plan for working towards your aspirations. So some of the things that you haven't quite achieved yet, and keeping in mind these things that we saw people regretted, let's not regret those anymore. Let's make sure we build these things in. So make sure you build the foundations. Starting now, build those foundations going forward. Make sure you're doing the right thing, the things that mean the most to you, speak up to have those opportunities, connect with the people, if what you need is more connection, do that with people that care about the same things as you. And then finally, ask, be bold, like do the stuff, ask if you can do the stuff. That's a lot of what I did with well-being, where it didn't really exist yet. It didn't, there wasn't a job description. People weren't really asking for it, but it was something that research was showing would be really helpful both for our staff and faculty and for our students. And so I started talking about it and I started asking about it. And it did take a little bit of courage. I mean, there were some times when I got a little bit nervous about it, but it felt important enough to me to speak up about it. And then it became important. And fortunately for me, is important enough that it's something that I now get to do all day, every day. So how do you build these things in? So foundationally, education, both working in education and having an education is really important to this person. And so sign up for those college courses that you've been putting off, even if you can only do one at a time, make a commitment to do that, because those foundations, start now. It's really important to do those things. And then apply for a leadership program. So that kind of covers working towards both a leadership role, which is something this person doesn't currently have, and working towards their personal development. So talk to your supervisor, talk to your leader about what your aspirations are, and go for it. Find out what the things are that can really get you there, and start doing those things now. Seek out a mentor. So that's around connections and somebody that can help guide you with this, somebody that can be a partner for you. And so you've crafted this new plan, both with redesign in your current role, in the way that you're doing the work, in the way that you work with your colleagues, and then also the way you view your work. So infusing it with meaning, knowing that it matters, revisiting the fact that it matters on a regular basis. And so moving forward to stay on track with your newly crafted plan, be bold and ask. Keep asking. If somebody says no, ask somebody else. Really think about what's needed and what makes sense, and you'll start to get yeses. And then view your work with new focus on meaning and energy. So what energizes you and what's meaningful to you and what matters to you. See that, connect your work to that every day. Write down your plan with dates. My colleague, Dr. Sharon Zeigowitz, came up with the genius acronym SMARTY goals. So most people are familiar with SMART goals, which are specific, time-bound, accomplishable, realistic goals, but add the why. Why am I doing this? How does this align with my purpose? And it infuses so much more intrinsic motivation when you see how it's getting you to something that's bigger, something that's more meaningful. And then finally, build in accountability, and that's an accountability partner, that's a mentor, that's your direct manager who can help you with all of these things. And so once you've articulated what it is you want to do and it makes sense and it contributes and it matters to the institution, it matters to the students, it matters to your colleagues, you're going to do something that's important. Um, you can tell people about it and they'll help support you in that. So take your plan and work your new plan, do your newly crafted job, and working towards your aspirations for making a difference, and go forward in life with a twinkle in your eye and a smile on your face, but with great and strong purpose in your heart.